I'm Meredith. I write books, do crafts, and teach stuff. And I want to start talking about crochet for absolute beginners. So in this video, we're going to talk about things like how to make a slip knot, how to hold your yarn in your hand, and also how to do a chain stitch, which of course is the foundation of just about every crochet piece. So let's start by talking about what we have here. This is a worsted weight yarn, which is a sort of medium weight yarn. This is what you find most of the time in the stores. If you see like Red Heart Super Saver, this particular one is Karen Simply Soft, but there are a lot of different brands of yarn. This, though, is the medium weight, and I am using the recommended size crochet hook for that weight, which is 5 millimeters. So we're going to start first by making a slip knot, and I want to show you, there are a lot of different ways to do it, but I want to show you the easiest way for beginners, and that is we're going to lay it here on the table. And then I'm going to make a loop. And the key thing here is that the tail of our yarn needs to be under the working yarn. That's the long bit that attaches to my ball of yarn, right? So the tail goes under the working yarn. Then I'm going to take 2 fingers and put them inside that loop that I just made. And I'm going to grab the working yarn with those 2 fingers, and then I'm going to grab the rest of the yarn with my other hand, and I'm going to pull. And that's made for us our slip knot. And when we're ready to put it on our hook, we just put our hook inside that loop and pull on our working yarn to tighten that slip knot. We don't want to pull it too tight. We just want it to be to fit around the widest part of our hook right here like this. Okay, so we have our slip knot on our hook. That's the beginning part. Now I want to talk about how you hold the yarn in your hand. Everyone does this differently. However, I want to show you the way that I was taught when I was little and talk about some of the benefits of doing it that way. So I'm going to pay out a little bit of this yarn and put my hand flat like this. I'm going to lay my working yarn across these 3 fingers, my pinky, ring, and middle finger. And then I'm going to loop it under my index finger and then over my index finger. Now, when I close my hand, I can use these 2 fingers to squeeze and release and control the tension of my yarn. I'm going to use my middle finger and my thumb to hold the tail. So this keeps what I'm working on steady. And then I can hold my crochet hook. So this is the sort of aperture, if you will, of how I hold my yarn in my hand. Now, the benefit of doing it this way is that my yarn is always in the same place. So whenever I need to grab it for a stitch, I always have that yarn in the same place. And that helps me keep a consistent tension. It helps me be consistent, really, with my stitches. Now, let's talk about holding the hook. I like to hold it with a pencil grip. That is simply how I learned when I was very young. I tend to hold it with a pencil grip. That's one of the reasons why this sort of shell out here, this spot kind of flattens and gives you a good place to hold it. But a lot of people also like to hold them overhand. Neither is right or wrong. It is simply a matter of preference. I will say that if you can start learning overhand, your wrist will probably thank you for it because it involves a lot less movement in your hand than what the pencil grip uses. And I think because sometimes my hands do get sore. So I think that that's a good way to think about that. Unfortunately, I learned and did it for so long with the pencil grip, I find overhand kind of difficult. Now let's talk about making stitches. So as I said, I've got my yarn in my hand over my index finger, which is sort of which stabilizes it. I'm going to pinch my tail between my thumb and my middle finger. And now I'm going to start making a chain stitch. I'm going to bring my hook between me and the yarn and loop it under to put on a loop. And notice I have the hook part facing me, so that makes it easier to grab. Then when I come down here to pull it through the other loop, I'm going to turn my hook just a quarter turn toward the knot, toward that slip knot, and that's going to make it pull through that loop a little bit easier. So again, I'm going in front of the yarn, under the yarn, and then pulling it through that loop. Between me and the yarn and under to grab that yarn and pull it through that loop. Okay, and when you get, when your work gets long enough that you need to adjust your grip on it, you just take that middle finger and thumb and move up your work. Now, when you are starting a project, it will tell you to chain a certain number of stitches. And in this case, I usually count the chains as I make them because I find that much easier. But if you are focused on making your chains and making them even, then counting might be difficult. So let's talk about the best way to count those stitches. There are two things that we can do, and I'm going to use my hook as a pointer here. So for the anatomy of a stitch, we have, in our chain stitch, we have the loop that we went through, right? And then on the opposite side, we have a bump here where our yarn pulled through the next loop. So each loop we are, and I'll show you how to make that, each loop we are pulling through that previous loop. So here is the loop, this is the top of the stitch, and here's the back of the stitch right here where we've got that bump. And whichever you find easiest to count, whether you want to count the loops on the top or the bumps on the back of the stitch, you can do either of those works. But you want to count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's going to show you, and that'll help you count how many stitches you made, so that you can know when you are ready to start working into that chain. I hope that helps with chains and getting started. Once again, I'm Meredith. I write books, do crafts, and teach stuff. And if you find this useful, then feel free to like and subscribe.